What is up, everyone? My name is Joseph and welcome back to Casually Competitive MTG, where it's our goal to give you semi-competitive EDH gameplay content that is both fast-paced and entertaining. We are continuing with what we did last episode and bringing you some Commander 2020 commanders to showcase what they can do to really get you excited for this set's release. We had the winner of the last game sit out, so we can show you another of the commander options. And just so you know, these games were recorded from our stream, and if you do want to watch these games live, head on over there and follow us. We do want to also let you know that we do now have a merch store live at casuallycompetitivemtg.com, and we have a Kickstarter for some playmat designs, and that link is also in the description. So if you want to help us out and you're looking to have a really nice and unique playmat, go ahead and check that link out in the description. On the merch store, we have 5 clothing designs split up between t-shirts, hoodies, tank tops, as well as backpacks and hats. So if you want to rep some merch, go ahead and check that out as well. In terms of other channel promotions, we have a Patreon. We do really appreciate all the support we get through Patreon. We really couldn't do it without you, so thank you. We do have some changes coming in the near future to some of the tiers, so keep an eye out for that. We also have a Discord available if you want to join our community and talk to us outside of the comment section. And finally, if you are going to be buying cards in the near future, we have a TCG affiliate link in the description. If you click on that link, any card purchases you make will help out the channel at no cost to you. That being said, that's the promotions out of the way. Let's get into the opening hands and deck introductions. Going first today is Joseph, playing the commander pairing Brallin Curiosity Rider and Shabraz the Skyshark. This 3-color Jeskai deck looks to do a lot of similar things that Niv Mizzet Control does. The goal of this deck is to play Brallin, put a Curiosity effect on her, and then find a way to discard enough times to deal enough damage to your opponents. Since Brallin does 1 damage to each opponent, chances are you only really need to discard 30 cards, which can be done by having 8 cards at your end step and just discarding and drawing, continually going back to your cleanup step, or through using a discard outlet or something to that effect. Joseph's opening hand contained a Flooded Strand, a Swan Song, a Mystic Remora, a Dispel, a Copy Artifact, a Pyroclasm, and a Savine's Reclamation. Going next, we have Jordan playing the commander pairing Ukkima Stalking Shadow and Cazur Ruthless Stalker. The goal of this deck is to put together a food chain combo in order to generate infinite mana by casting and exiling Eternal Scourge in order to cast and exile his commander, dealing 2 damage to each of his opponents every time Ukkima leaves the battlefield. Jordan's opening hand contained an Overgrown Tomb, an Ancient Tomb, a Stifle, a Swan Song, an Elvish Mystic, an Incubation Druid, and a Spellseeker. Going third, we had Nate playing Kalamax the Stormsire. The goal of this deck is to get insane value off of instant speed draw spells and copying them through Kalamax's ability, all while looking for a Kiki-Jiki Mirror Breaker win line. A really good card for this deck specifically is Court of Calling, because you can convoke Kalamax to tap him and then get a copy of Court of Calling at instant speed to find both of the combo pieces needed. Nate's opening hand contained an island, a forest, an exotic orchard, a Chrome Mox, a Cyclonic Rift, an Unsubstantiate, and an Into the Royal. And finally, we have Adam going last today playing Zaxara the Exemplary. The goal of this deck is to ramp out quickly and use his commander's ability in order to generate infinite mana using something like a Freed from the Real, and then with that infinite mana dumping it into a large X spell like a Blue Sun Zenith to draw at his opponents, or a Finale of Devastation to overrun the board. His opening hand contained 2 islands, a Chrome Mox, a Soul Ring, a Mystic Remora, a Cyclonic Rift, and a Stroke of Genius. Now with the opening hands out of the way, let's get into the gameplay. Joseph starts off by drawing, playing a Flooded Strand as his land for turn, and then cracking it, paying 1 life, to shock in a Hollowed Fountain, paying 2 more life to have it come in untapped. He then taps this Hollowed Fountain to cast a Mystic Remora. The Mystic Remora resolves, and Joseph gives the turn to Jordan. Jordan draws and plays a Flooded Strand as his land for turn. He then pays 1 life to crack it to search up a Breeding Pool to the battlefield, and pays 2 life to have it enter untapped. He then taps his Breeding Pool to cast an Elvish Mystic. With nothing left, Jordan gives the turn to Nate. Nate draws, plays an Exotic Orchard as his land for turn, and then, for 0 mana, casts a Chrome Mox, not paying for Mystic Remora, and Joseph draws. When Chrome Mox enters the battlefield, he imprints Into the Royal. With nothing left, he ships the turn over to Adam. Adam draws, plays an island as his land for turn, and then taps that island to cast his own Mystic Remora. He doesn't pay for Joseph's Mystic Remora, so Joseph draws, and then, in response to the Remora, Joseph pays 2 life to cast Mental Misstep, targeting Adam's Mystic Remora. Adam's Remora is countered, and then Adam, for 0 mana, casts a Chrome Mox, not paying for Remora. Joseph draws, and when the Chrome Mox enters the battlefield, Adam imprints a Cyclonic Rift. He then taps this Chrome Mox to cast a Soul Ring, again not paying for Remora. With nothing left, Adam gives the turn to Joseph. Joseph untaps and in his upkeep pays to keep his Remora around for at least 1 more turn. He then draws and plays a City of Brass as his land for turn. He then goes to his end step and discards Savine's Reclamation and Silence due to hand size. Jordan then goes to his turn, untaps, draws, and shocks in an Overgrown Tomb, taking 2 damage. He then taps his mana to cast an Incubation Druid. He then goes to combat and swings his Elvish Mystic at Joseph, who declares no blockers and takes 1 damage. With nothing left, Jordan ships the turn to Nate. Nate untaps, draws, plays a Forest as his land for turn, and immediately gives the turn to Adam. Adam untaps, draws, and plays a tapped Watery Grave as his land for turn, and deciding he's fed the fish enough, decides to give the turn to Joseph. Joseph untaps and decides to not pay for Mystic Remora and lets it go to his graveyard. He then draws and taps his mana, taking 1 damage from City of Brass, to cast a Paretic Ritual. He floats 3 red mana when it resolves, and he then uses 2 of that to cast an Azoria Signet, floating 1 red mana. He uses this red mana to filter into the Signet to help cast a Drannith Magistrate. The Magistrate resolves, and Joseph gives the turn to Jordan. Jordan untaps, draws, plays a Mana Confluence as his land for turn, and decides to give the turn to Nate. On Jordan's end step, Nate taps for 2 mana to cast an Unsubstantiate, targeting the Drannith Magistrate. There are no responses, and the Magistrate is bounced to Joseph's hand. Nate then goes to his turn, untaps, draws, plays a Hinterland Harbor as his land for turn, and then taps out completely to cast his commander Kalamax the Stormsire. All through with his turn, he gives the turn to Adam. Adam untaps, plays a Forest as his land for turn, and then taps his mana to cast his commander Zaxara the Exemplary. In response to this cast, Jordan taps for 5 mana to cast an Ad Nauseam. There are no responses to Ad Nauseam, and Jordan starts flipping. He continues to flip and lose life until he goes 20 cards deep and takes his health down to 16. He decides to stop there and puts all of those cards into his hand. Zaxara then resolves, and with nothing left, Adam gives the turn to Joseph. Joseph untaps, draws, and in his first main phase, taps his mana to cast a Copy Artifact, making a copy of Adam's Soul Ring. He then taps his mana, taking a damage from City of Brass and floating a colorless to cast a Pyroclasm. When it resolves, it deals 2 damage to each creature, killing Jordan's board. With nothing left, Joseph gives the turn over to Jordan. Jordan untaps, draws, and then plays a Reflecting Pool as his land for turn. He then, for 0 mana, casts a Mana Crypt. He then taps the Mana Crypt to cast a Soul Ring, floating 1 colorless mana, and then taps the Soul Ring to help cast a Rhystic Study, still floating that colorless. He then uses this colorless to help cast a Snap, targeting Kalamax. Snap resolves, Nate's commander is bounced to his hand, and Jordan then untaps 2 lands. He then taps for 1 green mana to cast a Carpet of Flowers. He then moves to his second main phase and targets Adam to add 2 green mana to his mana pool. With 1 of this green mana, he casts a Wild Growth on his Reflecting Pool. He then taps his mana to help cast both a Fintorn Elves and an Elves of Deep Shadow, floating 1 green mana. He then moves to his end step and discards 7 lands, as well as a Spellseeker and a Manipulate Fate due to hand size. Nate then goes to his turn, untaps, draws, plays an island as his land for turn, and then taps his mana to cast a Priest of Titania, paying for Rhystic Study. With nothing else, he ships the turn to Adam. Adam untaps, draws, plays an island as his land for turn, and wanting to hold up some mana, gives the turn over to Joseph. Joseph untaps, draws, and in his first main phase, taps his mana to recast his Drannith Magistrate. He does pay for Rhystic Study, but unfortunately, not having a land drop in hand, has to give the turn to Jordan after that. Jordan goes to his turn, untaps, and in his upkeep loses his mana crypt trigger, taking 3 damage. He then draws, and in his first main phase, targets Adam to add 3 green mana to his mana pool. He then plays an Underground River as his land for turn, and then uses his floating mana to cast an Eternal Scourge. The Scourge resolves, and Jordan gives the turn over to Nate. Nate untaps, draws, plays a Mana Confluence as his land for turn, and seeing the impending doom across the table, decides to hold up mana and pass the turn to Adam. Adam untaps, draws, plays a Hinterland Harbor as his land for turn, and, following Nate's example, passes the turn to Joseph. Joseph untaps, draws, and then taps his mana, taking 1 damage from City of Brass to help cast his commander, Brallin Skyshark Rider. He does not pay for Rhystic Study, Jordan draws, and then in response to the cast, Jordan taps for 1 mana to cast a Mystical Tutor. The tutor resolves, and he searches up a Demonic Tutor to the top of his library. Brallin then resolves, and Joseph, with nothing left to do, gives the turn to Jordan. Jordan untaps, and in his upkeep wins his Mana Crypt trigger, not taking any damage. He then draws, and targets Adam in his first main phase to add 3 blue mana to his mana pool from Carpet of Flowers. He then uses some of his mana to cast a Demonic Tutor, floating 1 colorless mana. In response to the Demonic Tutor, Adam taps for 2 mana to cast a counterspell, paying an extra for Rhystic Study. In response to the counterspell, Jordan uses 2 of his floating mana to cast a Narset's Reversal, targeting his original Demonic Tutor. In response to the Narset's Reversal, Nate taps his Priest of Titania for 3 total mana to help cast an overloaded Cyclonic Rift. He pays for Rhystic Study, and in response to the Cyclonic Rift, Joseph taps for 1 blue mana to cast a Swan Song, targeting Demonic Tutor, not paying for Rhystic Study. Jordan draws, and then in response to the Swan Song, Jordan taps for 1 blue mana to cast a Spell Pierce, targeting the Swan Song. In a last-ditch effort, when priority gets to him, Adam taps his mana to cast a Stroke of Genius, X equaling 4, targeting himself. He does not pay for Rhystic Study, Jordan draws, and on cast, Adam makes a 4/4 Hydra from his commander's ability, and then Stroke resolves, and Adam draws 4 cards. With nothing left, the Spell Pierce resolves, countering the Swan Song, and then, in response to the overloaded Cyclonic Rift, Jordan taps for 2 mana to cast a Delay, targeting the Rift. There are no responses to Delay. Delay resolves, exiling the Cyclonic Rift with 3 time counters on it, and Narset's Reversal then resolves, returning Demonic Tutor to Jordan's hand and allowing him to copy it, searching up a card to his hand. He then taps his mana to recast his Demonic Tutor, which this time resolves, and Jordan searches up another card to his hand. With the stack now clear and the tutoring now done, Jordan uses his mana to cast a Food Chain. Food Chain resolves, and Jordan then taps for 1 blue mana to cast a Chain of Vapor, targeting the Drannith Magistrate. The Drannith Magistrate is bounced, and Joseph decides to sacrifice 1 of his lands to copy Chain of Vapor to attempt to bounce Food Chain to Jordan's hand. In response, Jordan taps for a blue mana to cast a Swan Song to counter the copied spell. The Swan Song resolves, and Jordan finally has his combo online. Jordan exiles his Eternal Scourge using Food Chain's ability to add 4 blue mana to his mana pool that can be used for creature spells. He uses 3 of this to replay Eternal Scourge from exile, and then repeats this loop to generate essentially infinite blue and infinite black creature mana. And then when the mana is generated, he casts his commander, and then exiles his commander to Food Chain and deals 2 damage to any target opponent when it leaves the battlefield, and he then repeats this loop to kill his opponents, winning the game. Well, I don't have much to say after that game other than Ad Nauseam is a really good card. Who knew? Even though it wasn't the best Ad Nauseam I've ever seen, that was still a fantastic Ad Nauseam, and I do have to give the MVP card to Ad Nauseam. There isn't much to say on that, but I did want to take just a minute or two to talk about the Curiosity deck, or the Brallin deck. Similar to what I did in the last video where I talked about the 4 new commanders, let's just take the one that I haven't talked about, Brallin, Skyshark Rider, and I'll give my opinions on it real quick. I think this deck will end up being fairly strong in a semi-competitive meta. I think it sits right up there with Niv Mizzet, and honestly, I think in a few aspects, it kind of takes an edge out on Niv Mizzet. It might even be a little bit better. The fact that you have additional tutors, the commander has an easier casting cost, and you just have a whole nother color to work with really does give a lot of benefit to Brallin. It is a little bit more difficult to set up the infinite combo or the almost infinite combo to deal damage to your opponents, but realistically it's not that hard. And although it takes the combo from just a 2-card combo like Niv Mizzet and Curiosity, and now you need Brallin, Curiosity, and another effect, it's actually pretty easy. For example, a Wheel of Fortune gets you there. Any wheel really gets you there. Anything that lets you draw multiple cards and discard cards gets you there. For example, if you have Brallin and Curiosity and you cast an Ideas Unbound, you draw 3, discard 3, then draw 3 more, then it's you 3 cards. It's very likely you'll get over that 8 number, and then you go to your end step and then discard, draw, and win the game. And the fact that it deals damage to each opponent each time rather than one target each time, you really only need 30 or so cards left in your library to win with Brallin. So honestly, I do think that this might be a step above Niv Mizzet, but that might be a little bit of a hot take, and that might need some more play to really know that for sure. Personally, I'm a fan of it. After playing Niv Mizzet many times on the channel, I do like where this deck is going. I like the feel of it. It's very similar, and it just seems a little bit more comfortable and a little bit more synergistic. That being said, that's all I have to say on that commander pairing. Hope you guys did enjoy our 2 videos on the Commander 2020 commanders of our favorite 5. And I hope you're excited for our 5 Ikoria commanders as well. We'll do something very similar starting this Friday on Twitch, live stream the games, then take the games and make them into videos. And we may do 2 videos if we get 2 good games like we did this time. That being said, that's all we have for this video. If you do want to help support us and you're interested in buying merch or a playmat, head on over to casuallycompetitivemtg.com to check out what we have available. But other than that, that's all we got for this video. I am Joseph. This is Casually Competitive MTG, and we will see you next time.